What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Manny here. Welcome back to another video. This time, unfortunately, not from the beautiful balcony because there's a lot of wind out there and I figured the sound quality would be quite horrible. So we're coming from the inside today. I hope the lighting is quite well. It's quite good despite that. About a very interesting subject, or at least for me personally, this subject is very interesting. That is health versus athletics, or rather the question, how much athleticism is still healthy? You know, is the modern high-end athlete lifestyle still healthy? And questions like that. So I would be really glad to read your opinion and maybe even better your experience with the subject down below, and also drop a like. That's when you're there already. That's of course always appreciated. The subject came up during a recent live stream. I gotta say, these live streams are getting more and more interesting. It's amazing. Lots of fewer interactions, and lots of interesting questions. At least last time that was the case. So definitely join us for the next live sessions that we were gonna make. Probably in the somewhat near future, maybe a week or so. I always gonna announce them in the community tab where I posted a little picture and a little bit of the text. So yeah, it's besides the video tab up there somewhere. So if you want to check that out, I always try to announce it there. So how do I get this idea that the modern athletic approach could actually be not so healthy? Well, we first have to ask ourselves the question, what is health, right? What is health actually, what we're talking about? Then we can answer the question whether athletics are healthy or not. For me, health means to have a functional body in terms of biology, right? A functional body for a very long time. So what is a functional body? We could ask the question. Well, is a functional body a body that is able to climb up a rock wall, which is what we do when we do rock climbing? Not so really, in my opinion. A functional body in terms of biology is a body which is able to fulfill its biological job. And that's what's interesting. This came up during this live stream as well. Life purpose and all that kind of stuff. So for me, life purpose is to play, as I said in this live stream, beyond your biological jobs, right? But if we go down to the very, very simple life forms, there's not a lot of play there. There's only biological job, right? 99% of these life forms, like if you take a look at some insects, some ants, for example, they just fulfill their job, right? They follow their instincts, they fulfill their job, they are working just perfectly for their environment. Now, the higher up we get in the life hierarchy, the more we are able to go beyond that, to go beyond our biological jobs. Our biological job as humans, for example, one of them is to procreate. So if you have a body, for example, that is able to procreate for a very long time, this requires health, right? So this is how I would describe health. A functional body that is able to fulfill its biological jobs, for a very long time. So we could say that because nature wants us to do our biological job for a relatively long time, nature also wants us to be healthy. And thereby we could also say that our natural instincts are probably in general actually very health promoting inside of our natural environment, which is where we don't live nowadays anymore, right? Most of us at least. So nowadays we have something that's man-made, like potato chips, which is exceptionally good at pleasing our natural senses, right? It's salty, it has that umami taste, it's fatty, it's carby. It pleases all of our natural instincts at once, but in nature we wouldn't have access to that stuff and we wouldn't be able to ruin ourselves with it, right? So in nature, in a natural environment, our natural instincts are actually quite helpful to promote longevity and health, probably. And nature, fascinatingly, also planted in us this tendency towards laziness, right? When we look at animals in nature, including humans in nature, most of them only do the bare minimum to survive. They spend as many calories as necessary for their survival, to gather food, to procreate, and all that kind of stuff. Everything beyond that is play, but the play is not taking up 99% of their lifetime, right? 99% of their time is gathering food and then gathering food. 50%, maybe 30, even 20% of the time is, depending on what animals we're looking at. The carnivores, they lying around a lot. They spend maybe 10% of the time with hunting, and then they're lying around and procreating and, sparing calories the other 90% of their time, right? Depending on what life form we are looking at, the hummingbird, for example, burns a hell lot of calories all the time, super high carb, and it gathers food all the time, right? So it depends on what your biological job is as the animal that you are, but every animal usually has a tendency towards sparing calories, because when you burn more calories than you actually have to, well, then you have also more cell turnover, more enzyme turnover that you have to, and probably in the end this will cost you a little bit of lifetime, right? I also made this observation with myself. If I work out a lot or if I climb a lot, I definitely need more calories, right? Up to thousands of calories more, maybe even double as much than my basal metabolic rate, which is maybe somewhere at 2,000 calories a day. On a heavy day with lots of climbing, lots of approach hiking, even maybe after hangboard session or something like that, I could definitely burn 4,000 calories. That's double as much calories burned than was necessary for that day. And I would figure that in the end, this stuff adds, of course, up, and it could cost you a little bit of lifetime, definitely. But what about muscle mass? Muscle mass seems to be a very highly appreciated and promoted thing in modern society, right? Especially with all the fitness YouTubing and all that kind of social media stuff that's out there. It's usually admired if you have a lot of muscle mass. Well, the thing is, just the fact that we have more muscle costs us more energy. So I think there was a study done, I don't know the name of it or the year when it was done and anything, but just for individuals to hold more muscle, it required them more calories, even though they didn't even use them, right? So just by holding onto this muscle mass, the body spends more energy. And if you are not using this muscle mass, the body will do its best to degrade it again, okay, so that it can get rid of it actually, so that it doesn't have to spend as many calories to just simply uphold this muscle mass. Why do we even generate this muscle mass in the first place, right? We could say, well, it's training. The body wants to get even better at that thing that you're doing with him, this kind of training, to be even able to climb 9A instead of 8C plus or something like that. But we have to be aware of the fact that we are already in a super unnatural environment there, and the body probably doesn't even know that you're climbing 9A right now, so it doesn't even know that it has to get even better for that. Rather, what the body is doing, it is trying its best to mitigate the stress response that climbing 9A puts onto your body, right? Onto your finger joints, onto your tendons, onto your muscles. And one very effective way to reduce stress on the individual cell, on the individual tissue strain, if you want so, is to make the tissue bigger, to make it simply bigger in diameter. And that's why we see joints getting bigger, tendons getting bigger, and muscles getting bigger as well, obviously. So does that necessarily mean that the body wants to have this much muscle and that it's healthy for him? Well, I don't think so, especially not if we're considering that it costs him more calories to uphold even this additional tissue, right? So the body probably only wants to have so much tissue as absolutely necessary to fulfill your biological jobs, which is to go for a hunt, to procreate and all that kind of stuff. But everything beyond that is actually unnecessary and again costing a little bit more lifetime in the end, So this is how I think about muscle mass, even though it is socially nowadays seen as a very healthy thing. You should work out, you should have a fit body, you should have all these muscles, and you should look good on the beach, right? It is cool to have that stuff, and it's cool to be able to climb 9A, right? But to claim at the same time that this level of fitness is also healthy, I think that's probably not the right way to look at it. And then we also have to talk about diet, obviously. Diet has a huge impact on health as well. I personally think that there's a reason why in the past the kings and queens and all the high families, the lords and all those who could afford it rather tended towards the very nutrient dense and very highly praised animal products, very fatty meats, fatty cuts of meats, wild animals. They went for a hunt and all that kind of stuff. What the high lords with all their property, their land, what they were doing, of course. That's not the working class, right? That's rather the class that lays back and relaxes and governs everything. They do the governing jobs, and then they pass this job on to their offspring, and it was very hard to get in there, because it was a very privileged and precious position in society back then. Whereas as the farmer, the lower working class dude, all you would have usually is some carbs, right? You had your potatoes, you had your bread, and you had also maybe one or the other animal product that you raised yourself, but you had to give that away to the working class as well. To the higher class, to the kings and queens. So there is definitely something to this thing that carbohydrates promote athletic performance and working power, definitely, because that's what I also have experienced. If I don't eat any carbohydrates, I definitely have lower access to my max power, on rock. But that doesn't mean that carbohydrates are healthy, for example, right? Just because carbohydrates enable you to work so hard, the working hard is already questionable whether that's healthy or not. But just because carbohydrates in an artificial way somehow enable you to do that doesn't mean that carbohydrates are healthy. Rather, I would say carbohydrates are a very modern life hack, or a very modern biohack, so to say, by us humans, who were able to discover that stuff which we wouldn't have in the first place in nature, a very carbohydrate deprived environment, right? Where we rather would go for a hunt, we would rather go for the animal products and maybe some fruit here and there. But also wild fruit is a lot less sweet, right? So a lot less sugar content. The modern accessibility of carbohydrates with grains and potatoes and all that kind of stuff is very artificial. It enables us to do a lot of work, more work, but yeah, is that healthy or not? I would go with the assumption it's rather not as healthy as a relatively low carbohydrate lifestyle. And that's coming from a person who lived as a high carb vegan for over 2 years, right? Up to 3 years even. I have the comparison, and I can definitely say that a very high carbohydrate consumption has impacts on your health, especially combined with lots of athleticism. You're getting really lean. You're getting super shredded, which is another question whether that's healthy or not, right? Because, for example, your sexual functionality, which is another thing that is a very biological need, a very biological job, right? Which nature wants you to do, which requires health, of course. This suffers a bit on a very high carb athletic lifestyle, right? So yeah, bottom line, I think carbs are necessary for high-end athletic performance if you really want to reach your limit. But probably it's not even, desired by nature that you go to these lengths to achieve that athletic goal, which is very artificial in the first place, right? And therefore probably not so health promoting, right? As it is usually perceived. And then we could go on about a very low body fat percentage in general and why that's not ideal probably for health. We could talk about sex drive. We could talk about the ability to survive periods where there's less food around, right? Which is also very, very crucial. We could talk about the ability to survive maybe some sickness, some disease that struck you, right? You can't go for a hunt for a week maybe. So what are you going to do then? What are you going to do then in nature? Well, hopefully you've got your tribe who is able to feed you, but it's definitely helpful during those periods to have a bit of reserves on your body, right? So yeah, all these kind of things point towards the direction that a very low body fat percentage is rather not so health promoting. and definitely from a nature perspective not as desirable as it is put as it is artificially promoted via social media nowadays, right? So yeah, these are just a couple of points, man. We could talk about lactic acid as well, man. The individuals which are exceptionally able to metabolize lactic acid. I mean, I wonder how someone like Adam Ondra, for example, with this much mileage of rock climbing and training and whatnot, how his body handles all that stuff. And there we can also talk again about genetics, right? Probably there's also a very significant difference amongst individuals in their ability, their capacity to metabolize all that stuff. Some of us have just more of these enzymes genetically, some of us have less, and these individuals then are of course more able to endure more exercise without having to sacrifice so much of their health than other individuals, right? So this is another very interesting genetic factor to think about. Anyway, I think I rambled enough about the subject. What you gonna do? Sit at home all day, eat the perfect diet and grow to 100? Of course not, you wanna achieve something in life, right? So that's why I'm gonna hit the finishing now for a couple of reps. I hope you enjoyed the video, hope you enjoyed the episode. Drop your opinion and your experience preferably down below, that would be very appreciated, as well as a like if you enjoyed it, that is also quite nice. And I'll see you soon with a couple of reps in the next one. Bye.